O friends, I am mad with love, but no one knows my pain. My mattress is as if stacked with barbs. How shall I sleep? The bed of my beloved is up on high. How shall I meet him? Only the one who is wounded knows what woundedness is. Only the jeweler knows the value of the lost jewel. In anguish I wander from door to door, but no doctor have I found. Mira cries out to her Lord, O Dark One, you alone are the doctor who can heal this pain. बन बन डोलो बद मिला नहीं कोई मीरा के प्रभु पीर मिटेगी मीरा के प्रभु पीर मिटेगी जब बद सवरिया कोई एरी मैं तो प्रेम दीवानी मेरा दर्द न जाने कोई एरी मैं तो प्रेम दीवानी मेरा दर्द न जाने कोई एरी मैं तो प्रेम दीवानी मेरा दर्द न जाने कोई
Om Tadekam Smaramasthadekam Bhajamaha Tadekam Jagat Sakshi Rupam Namamaha Sadekam Nidhanam Niralambamisham Bhavam Bodhipotam Sharanyam Vrajamaha Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. On that alone do we meditate. That alone do we worship. To that alone, the witness of the universe, do we bow. To that one who is our sole eternal support. The self-existent Lord, the raft to safety across the ocean of this world, do we come for refuge. Om, peace. Peace, peace. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome. And today we are talking about Vivekananda and the way of love, Vivekananda's way of love. And thank you to Preeti for the beautiful rendition of the Meera song, Meerabai's song. Meera was mad with love for Krishna. And that love was so intense that it created a heart-rending pain in her heart that she couldn't see Krishna, that she couldn't find Krishna. Now, Swami Vivekananda, of course, knew this song very well. And when he had come back from America to India, he was visiting Balaram Bose's house, well known as Balaram Mandir, the temple of Balaram, Sri Ramakrishna's close householder disciple. And Swami Turiyananda went there to see him, his brother disciple. And he relates the following incident. He says, I had gone to see Swami Vivekananda at Balaram Mandir and found him pacing the veranda like a caged lion. He was deep in thought and did not notice my presence. He began to hum under his breath the celebrated and pathetic song of Mirabai, this song which we just heard. And the tears welled up in his eyes. He stopped and leaned against the balustrade and hid his face in his two palms. His voice became more distinct, and he sang, repeating several times, oh, nobody understands my sorrow. Nobody understands my sorrow. And again, only he who suffers knows the anguish of sorrow. Turiyananda continues here. His voice pierced me through and through like an arrow, moving me to tears. I could not understand the cause of his affliction. Then, suddenly, I understood. It was a tremendous universal sympathy with the suffering and oppressed that was the cause of his mood. So it's a profound glimpse of the heart of Swami Vivekananda, who was moved to tears, feeling the suffering of humanity, and particularly the suffering of the poor, the suffering of the uneducated, the suffering of the hungry, the suffering of the ignorant in India and all over the world. So this tremendous love of Swami Vivekananda for all moved him into this universal compassion, and yet then he also suffered. Now that's that it should bring so much pain. Ordinarily we think that love gives us joy, and yet, as Swami Turiyananda put it, he wept tears of blood for the suffering of humanity. He himself would say love brings only a reaction of bliss. If it does not, it is not love. It is mistaking something else for love. Today I'd like to share some of Swami Vivekananda's thoughts and writings about love, and let us see where that takes us. I'll be reading from different quotes, and I don't know how we could better spend a few minutes on a Sunday morning than reading the words of Swami Vivekananda. And why I wanted to do this, because we know Swami Vivekananda, those of us who are Vedanta students, we know him as the great teacher of yoga, as a great preacher of the divinity of the soul, and of the unity of existence, the harmony of religions. And yet, when I read Swami Vivekananda, I keep finding popping up love. His teachings, his writings, his life are all suffused with an intense love for the divine, for God, for the Divine Mother, and for everyone with whom he came into contact, his friends, his brother disciples, his disciples, and even his enemies. And we find this bliss rising up in him at the same time, this bliss which he equates with love, which he equates with the divine. So for Swami Vivekananda, love is God and love is bliss. And yet, which lover will not suffer when his beloved, when her beloved is in pain? So this is how this tremendous lover of humanity also had to suffer for his love, because he found all of us, all of humanity, suffering in the bonds of ignorance and hunger and poverty and exploitation. So this is Swami Vivekananda's compassion, which stems from his intense love for all beings. So what is love, according to Swami Vivekananda? Now, get ready, because, and I think most of you who have read Swamiji know, he sets the bar very high. What we ordinarily think of as love, he won't accept that as love. Ordinarily, we think of love, well, it's a deep affection, we care about someone. We know what it is, but how do we actually define love? Well, that's a little difficult. It's a readiness to, maybe a readiness to serve, to sacrifice ourselves for others. Difficult to put into words, but it's mostly, and in our culture especially, we connect it with romantic love, with finding that one special person and committing our lives to living with that person. And most of what we call love, actually, Swami Vivekananda will say, is nothing of the sort. Romantic love, he would say it's a myth, because it always comes to an end. We say we love so many things, no? We love our cars, we love our cats, we love our Scotch whiskey or our Guinness ale or whatever it is we love. We love our children, yes, and we love our spouses and our parents and all that. Let's see how it measures up to Swami Vivekananda's definition. Of course, I think we can understand when we say we love if we're talking about ordinary objects or food or all that kind of thing, that's not really love. We use the term love in a very casual way oftentimes. That's just a kind of investment of mental and emotional energy in an object or in a person or a place or a thing. It's a kind of attachment, no doubt. It's a kind of attachment. It's called a cathexis, but it's not love. And it will make us suffer. That attachment will bring us suffering. Swamiji says, I'm not talking about what every one of us means by love. Little namby-pamby love is lovely. Man falls in love with woman, and woman goes to die for man. The chances are that in 5 minutes, John kicks Jane, and Jane kicks John. This is materialism, and no love at all. Calls it materialism. Yes, because it's based on bodies, not on the spirit. If John could really love Jane, he would be perfect that moment. If we could really love someone, we would be perfect that moment. Love itself is God. You have that love whether you know it or not. He gives us this beautiful assurance. We have that love, only most of us, we don't know it. Love itself is God. We have God. We have the divine within us. And if we just step out of the way, and we'll be coming back again and again to that, if we just step out of the way, that love is there. And we can become perfect if we can love in that way. So Swami Vivekananda gives us a test of love to see, is it real love? And he calls it a triangle of love. There are 3 angles in a triangle, and as you know, a tripod is with 3 legs is very strong and stable. These 3 he calls essential to true love. The first angle of our triangle of love, he says, is that love knows no bargaining, no shopkeeping. Wherever there is any seeking for something in return, there can be no real love. It becomes a mere matter of shopkeeping. So it means we don't have expectations. Now, we may think that we love without expectation, but let's think about it really. Don't we expect at least that the ones we love should love us back? Don't we expect at least that the ones we love should be nice to us? Don't we expect at least, I often joke, I love you, honey, but take out the trash. You know, the kind of domestic squabbles that we see. Yes, we love each other, but you're not helping enough. You take out the trash. I'm doing so much. Oh, but I do the dishes, like that. You know, we get these are expectations we attach to our love. Then Swamiji says, it's not love, it's shopkeeping. I give you love and you give me something in return. And the same goes for God. I love you, God, so you should give me, I'm such a good devotee, so you should give me good health and lots of money and a good job and a good husband or a good wife. That's shopkeeping. It's not religion, it's not love. So this is the first one, the first test. Is there any shopkeeping? Is there any expectation of some return? Then it's not. It's not unconditional. So we see that what Swami Vivekananda means by love is unconditional love. Okay, number 2. Oh, let me read this beautiful example he gives of when we go out into nature and perhaps we see a beautiful landscape with mountains and the sun is setting in the clouds and it's so beautiful and we feel lifted temporarily to another state. And he says, when you see a beautiful scenery and fall in love with it, you do not demand anything in the way of favor from the scenery. We don't expect anything from the scenery. We just We're lifted up by it. Nor does the scenery demand anything from you. Yet the vision thereof brings you to a blissful state of the mind. It tones down all the friction in your soul. It makes you calm, almost raises you for the time being beyond your mortal nature, and places you in a condition of quiet, divine ecstasy. The nature mystics know all about this. This nature of real love is the first angle of our triangle. Ask not anything in return for your love. Let your position be always that of the giver. Give your love unto God, but do not ask anything in return, even from Him. It's a beautiful example. I hope all of us have experienced that in seeing a beautiful sunset or in natural beauty, and we feel lifted up. And we don't want anything from it. There's nothing that we ask. We just lift it up. And there's nothing we can give. It's just a state of quiet, divine ecstasy. This is, Swami Vivekananda gives this as a way of understanding what he means by this love that seeks nothing. All right, number 2. Love knows no fear. The second angle of the triangle of love. Love knows no fear. He says, love conquers all fear. Fear comes from the selfish idea of cutting one's self off from the universe. So that goes back to the Upanishads. Where there are two, there is fear. If we feel ourselves to be separate from others, then there is fear. When we know ourselves to be one, there can be no fear. The smaller and the more selfish I make myself, the more is my fear. Yes, the more we want to keep everything for ourselves, the more we're afraid someone will take it away from us. So, when we love, say, especially perhaps in conjugal love or actually matrimonial love, that kind of love, I think there's very often a little fear attached. What if my beloved won't love me anymore? What if my beloved decides to love someone else or go run off with somebody else? And it happens, of course. It happens. So there's that fear. Then someone says, nope. Swamiji says, no, not yet. True love. True love knows no fear. He does say, this is beautiful, the less you think of yourself as an insignificant person, the less fear there will be for you. So long as there is the least spark of fear in you, there can be no love there. Love and fear are incompatible. God is never to be feared by those who love Him. So wonderful, because this idea of fearing God, that was quite prevalent in this country when Swami Vivekananda was here. And there are still groups that preach this, the fire and brimstone, and be careful, you could go, God is going to send you to eternal damnation and all that. And kids grew up terrified of God. All right, the third angle takes it one step higher. Let's remember, we are moving from, we don't move, as Swami Vivekananda says, we don't move from error to truth. It's not that we're going from error to truth, that we're wrong and we have to become right. We move from lower truth to higher truth. So let us accept where we are, and we learn about the highest ideal of love. We may not have attained to that state yet, but let us aim high. The higher we aim, the higher we go. So don't feel disheartened when we see that, well, I myself see, I had a quarrel with one of the brothers in the monastery yesterday. How far has my love come? Not very far, apparently. But still, let us understand the ideal. Let us aim for the highest. So the third angle of this triangle of love is that love knows no rival. Love is the highest ideal. And let me read a little more so it becomes clear. True love never comes until the object of our love becomes to us our highest ideal. It may be that in many cases human love is misdirected and misplaced, but To the person who loves, the thing he loves is always his own highest ideal. So what does he mean? Another way, he explains it in another way as follows. He says, the third or the apex is that love loves for the sake of love itself. Love loves for the sake of love itself. Even the idea of object vanishes. Love is the only form in which love is loved. Well, it's a little hard to grasp, I think. Let me see if I can read a little further, see what Swami Vivekananda says. He says, when someone has this last and most perfect form of love, then all desires vanish. What more could we want when our hearts are completely full with this highest love? Forms and doctrines and churches drop away. Even the desire for freedom is given up. The highest love is the love that is sexless, for it is perfect unity that is expressed in the highest love. And sex differentiates bodies. It is therefore only in spirit that union is possible. This is, Swami Vivekananda comes back again and again to this point of unity, perfect unity. Love, what is love? Love is nothing but that unity expressed in this world of duality, expressed in this relative world of names and forms where we feel ourselves to be separate, and yet we know, according to Vedanta, that we are not separate. We are all connected. Love is the manifestation of unity in duality. He gives the example of an oyster covering a piece of sand with its mother of pearl to make a pearl. As the oyster throws over the irritants it finds in its shell, the substance that turns the irritants into beautiful pearls, so a person throws out love, and it always wants the highest ideal that we love, and the highest ideal is always selfless. He puts this in the old patriarchal language, but I'll have to read it that way for it to make sense. Man throws out love, and it is always man's highest ideal that he loves, and the highest ideal is always selfless. So, man loves God. God is love, and we love God, or love. We only see love. Love cannot be expressed. Love for love's sake cannot be expressed to those who have not felt it. So for Swami Vivekananda, all love ultimately is love for God. It reminds us of the Upanishad when the teaching, is the wife loved for the sake of the love, for the sake of the wife? The wife is loved for the sake of the self, for the sake of the divine within the wife. Whatever we love, we are actually loving God. When we love our wives and husbands and children and parents and friends, and we are loving God. And that love itself is divine, is a manifestation of divinity. It is sacred. So he sets the bar very, very high for us. How can we hope to live up to this? He admits himself, it is very easy to talk, he says. From my childhood I have heard of seeing God everywhere and in everything. And then I can really enjoy the world. But as soon as I mix with the world and get a few blows from it, the idea vanishes. We can understand this. He says, I am walking in the street thinking that God is in every person I see. And a strong man comes along and gives me a push, and I fall flat on the footpath. Then I rise up quickly with clenched fist. The blood has rushed to my head. Immediately I become mad. Everything is forgotten. Instead of encountering God, I see the devil. So this is our condition. Yes, it's difficult. But Swami Vivekananda doesn't say, well, in that case we shouldn't just forget it. No. What's the use? Perseverance will conquer, he says. We have to hear the truth, we have to meditate on it, we have to put it into practice, we have to manifest it in our lives through practice. Practice, practice. Now, we may ask, is this kind of love we're talking about possible between human beings? Swami Vivekananda gives a qualified answer. He says, well, maybe not, or maybe we get a taste of it. Human love, he says, is mixed up with attributes. It is dependent, too, on the other's attitude. And there's three kinds of loves, he points out. The lowest love is selfish. It consists in the pleasure of being loved. Okay, we all love to be loved. Someone loves me. How nice. That's the lowest form of love, the pleasure in being loved. Above this is mutual love. I love you, and you love me. But this also ceases mutually. I don't love you anymore. Okay, I don't love you anymore either. True love is all giving. It is almost impossible to love a human being like this. But it is possible so to love God. So he doesn't say it's impossible. He says almost impossible. Okay, it's difficult. But we can love God that way. And I think if we can love God that way, there's enough to go around. If we can love God that way, we can love other human beings that way also. If we put God first. Sri Ramakrishna's teaching, if you have a number, people think he didn't know mathematics, but he knew this one. If you have a 1 with 100 zeros after it, you have a very, very big number. So that 1 is God, and all the zeros are everything else that we have in our lives. Our families, our loved ones, our possessions, our money, our learning. What happens if you take the 1 away? Nothing. You can have 100 zeros and it's still 0. But put the 1 in front of it and you have a very big number. That 1 is God. So let me read a little more about this love between human beings, because that's always on our minds. The perfect love is very rare in human relation, for human love is almost always interdependent and mutual. But God's love is a constant stream. Nothing can hurt or disturb it. When one loves God as one's highest ideal, as no beggar, wanting nothing, then is love carried to the extreme of evolution, and it becomes a great power in the universe. This power, Swami Vivekananda believed in the power of love to transform us, the power of love to transform this world. He would say, love never fails, writing to one of his disciples. Love never fails, my son. Today or tomorrow or ages after, truth will conquer. Love shall win the victory. Do you love your fellow men? Where should you go to seek for God? Are not the poor, all the poor, the miserable, the weak, gods? Why not worship them first? Believe in the omnipotent power of love. Have you love? You are omnipotent. Are you perfectly unselfish? If so, you are irresistible. It was through the power of this love that Swami Vivekananda could come to this country and work so hard as he did to basically overturn society, overturn religion in this country by smashing the dogmatism and the fanaticism and the erroneous belief in the sin and hellfire and all that stuff. Tremendous. And what's the mechanism? He will say, there is an infinite omniscient spirit behind that can do everything. Break every bond. And that spirit we are. And we get that power through love. Well, we see the kind of love Swami Vivekananda is talking about is a completely unselfish love. Basically what it means is that we, our little selves, our little selfish personality that wants to accumulate and own and control and all of that has to step aside. The old man must die. As Swami Vivekananda used to say, quoting the Christian mystics, the old man must die, the old woman must die. And when it is that little me that dams up this tremendous river of love. Amazing that such a little me could dam up such a tremendous river, but it happens that way. So we have to get out of the way. So this love of ours is tested in the crucible of our interpersonal relationships, in the family, in the office, in the monastery. It's like a crucible under high pressure and temperature. The ingredients are put together, and the test is, does love come out? Yes. Work through freedom. Work through love. The word love is very difficult to understand. Love never comes until there is freedom. There is no true love possible in the slave. And then he says, we ourselves work for the things of the world as slaves. We are slaves to the world, working only for things. So then there can be no love for us in that case. Our work is not true work. Here is a test. Every act of love brings happiness. There is no act of love which does not bring peace and blessedness as its reaction. It gives a wonderful hint. This is from his introduction to Raja Yoga. What comes around goes around. And this is also great to remember, and it will help us. It's a good ammunition for our minds when our minds are not cooperating with us. Do not hate anybody, because that hatred which comes out from you must, in the long run, come back to you. If you love, that love will come back to you, completing the circle. It is as certain as can be. Elsewhere he says, every vicious thought will rebound. Every vicious thought, not merely actions, even a vicious thought will come back to us. So let us be careful and commit ourselves to love as best we can. Now, love, Swami Vivekananda also equates with bliss. The Sat-Chit Ananda of Vedanta, we describe the infinite reality called Brahman as Sat-Chit Ananda, infinite existence, infinite consciousness, and infinite bliss. He says here he equates this with love. Real existence, real knowledge, and real love are eternally connected with one another. The three in one. This is the nature of reality. Where one of them is, the others also must be. They are the three aspects of the one without a second, the existence, knowledge, bliss. When that existence becomes relative, we see it as the world. When the existence becomes relative, we see it as this world. When knowledge or consciousness becomes relative, it is modified into knowledge of the things of this world. And that bliss forms the foundation of all true love known to the heart of man. The quote that I first came across that led me to want to speak on this topic is an amazing gem that he hid in a letter to his dear American sister, Mary Hale. They had such a close and beautiful brother-sister relationship. And Swami Vivekananda would often write very chatty letters to her, very personal letters. Oh, I'm doing fine in such and such a place, and I met so-and-so, and last night I ate something and I couldn't digest it well. I mean, all kind, whatever. And in between, he slips these amazing teachings. And in May of 1896, in his letter to Mary Hale, he slipped in this little powerful definition of religion. The eternal, the infinite, the omnipresent, the omniscient is a principle, not a person. He's talking about the absolute reality. The omniscient is a principle, not a person. You and I and everyone are but embodiments of that principle, Vedanta. And the more of this infinite principle is embodied in a person, the greater is that person. And all in the end will be the perfect embodiment of that. Yes, all will be perfect embodiments. We will all be perfect embodiments of that. And thus all will be one, as they are now essentially. This is all there is of religion. He boils it down to this. We are all embodiments, manifestations of that infinite principle. And we are all destined to become perfect embodiments of that. And then we shall all be one, as we are in essence. And this last phrase he adds to it, and the practice is through this feeling of oneness that is love. The practice, how do we practice it? How do we manifest that eternal principle of which is infinite, omnipresent, and omniscient? Through a feeling of oneness that is love. So as we talked about earlier, that love being the manifestation of non-duality, of unity in duality. Do you feel for others, he would ask. If you do, you are growing in oneness. Growing in oneness. Okay. He gives a tall order to his disciple Goodwin and to all of us. Writing from Switzerland, it is unswerving love and perfect unselfishness that conquer everything. We Vedantists, in every difficulty, ought to ask the subjective question, why do I see that? Why can I not conquer this with love? It's a tall order. In every difficulty. We face difficulties continually, isn't it? Life is made up of facing difficulties, constant difficulties. We are having difficulties all the time. Swami Vivekananda says, okay, you're having a difficulty? The Vedantist should ask, we ought to ask ourselves, why do I see that? Why am I seeing this difficulty? Why am I seeing this problem? And why can I not conquer this with love? Maybe because there's a lot of attachment. Maybe I still have a lot of attachment over this issue, something. Maybe I'm still really being selfish here. Doesn't mean that we're going to let everybody walk over us. That love brings tremendous strength. He goes on in this letter. And this letter was written when Swami Vivekananda had just received word that one of his beloved disciples, Swami Kripananda, formerly known as Leon Landsberg, with whom Swamiji lived in New York and who was one of his first, perhaps his first sannyasin disciple in America, had betrayed him. He had gone off his rocker and had gone to the newspapers, and there had been one of those expose articles on Swami Vivekananda and the scandals and this and that, and it was all nonsense. And this news had come to Swami Vivekananda. He had heard from various people that Kripananda has lost it. So this is why he's, in this context, he's writing these things, facing difficulties. A good world, a happy world, and social progress are all terms equally intelligible with hot ice or dark light. Did you catch that? This idea, we have this idea that this world should be good, it could be good, it will be good, it must be good. We have to make it good. We're going to have progress, and we're going to go forward, and we're going to fix all the problems. It's not so hard. We just got to elect the right people and kill all the bad guys and everything. We're going to make it perfect here, right? That's the idea we have in our minds, that it's going to be, we can make it perfect. It's just like, we're not quite there, but it's going to be perfect. We're making progress. Swami Vivekananda says, all these terms are equally intelligible with hot ice or dark light. If it were good, it would not be the world. The soul foolishly thinks of manifesting the infinite in finite matter. Intelligence through gross particles. But at last it finds out its error and tries to escape. Finally, we realize it's not going to happen. And then it's time to escape. This going back, this pulling back, this going back, he says, is the beginning of religion. By religion, he always means spirituality, finding God, transforming our lives, realizing who we are. This going back is the beginning of religion and its method. Destruction of self, lowercase s, destruction of self, that is love. Comes back to love again. The method, this going back is the beginning of religion, and the method is destruction of self, that is love. Not love for wife or child or anybody else, but love for everything else except this little self. So can we destroy this little self with love? This little me which thinks I'm so important and that my way is the right way and it's either my way or the highway and all of that. That has to get out of the way. And then this flood of love, it's here. Let it out. At the end of this letter, he writes, Swami Vivekananda writes about Kripananda who had betrayed him. He writes, "A few days ago I felt a sudden irresistible desire to write to Kripananda. Perhaps he was unhappy in thinking of me, so I wrote him a warm letter. Today, from the American news, I see why it was so. I sent him flowers gathered near the glaciers. Asked Miss Waldo to send him some money and plenty of love. Love never dies. The love of the Father never dies, whatever the children may do or be. He is my child. He has the same or more share in my love and help now that he is in misery." How amazing. He has just been betrayed by his disciple, and he's saying, now he deserves more of my love because he's in misery, more of my love. Now, something we need to address is the idea of loving ourselves, self-love. And maybe it's considered a kind of pop psychology. You have to love yourself, self-compassion and all of that. But there's a deep truth here. If we don't love ourselves, if there's when we say overcome ourself, he's saying destruction. We must destroy our little self, destruction of self through love. It doesn't mean through hate. He's saying through love, not through hate. If there's any hatred in us, it's a tremendous constriction of our heart, and we're not going to go anywhere with that hatred. How can we attain true love if there's even one being whom we hate, even if it's ourselves? And yet, many people have the difficulty with the idea of loving themselves or accepting ourselves as we are. Now, we have to distinguish also between this idea and narcissism. Narcissism is a kind of infatuation with one's own self at the expense of everybody else. It's stuck at that first level of love, at the pleasure of having other people love us and trying to manipulate the world such that everybody loves us and we don't love anybody. That's, of course, not the ideal. But let's remember that our true self is infinite love. How can we not love that which is infinite love? Swami Vivekananda, he puts it this way: faith in ourselves will do everything. The old religion said that he or she was an atheist who did not believe in God. The new religion says that he or she is the atheist who does not believe in him or herself. But it is not selfish faith, because the Vedanta, again, is the doctrine of oneness. It means faith in all, because you are all. Love for yourselves means love for all, love for animals, love for everything, for you are all one. All right, love yourself. Make that S a capital S. Make the S a capital S. Love for yourselves means love for all. Yes, when we attain to that universal love, how can we not be a part of it? How can we not be included in that universal love? We are included. Swami Vivekananda wrote in one of his poems to Mary Hale, this wonderful line. The poem reads like an Upanishad. Not two nor many, 'tis but one. And thus in me all me's I have. I cannot hate. I cannot shun myself from me. I can but love. Did you catch it? It's like the Isha Upanishad in modern English verse. This tremendous verse, the 6th verse, mantra of the Isha Upanishad. Yastu sarvāni bhūtānyatmanyeva nupashyati sarva bhūteshu chātmanam tato na vijugupsate. The sage, this is describing the sage of realization who finds all beings in the self. Everyone, all beings are in that self with a capital S, the Atman, that infinite consciousness which is my true being. And finding that self, that one self, shining in all beings. And therefore, this sage who realizes this cannot hate anyone. This is the meaning of the mantra in Sanskrit. And likewise, Vivekananda puts it this way, not two nor many, 'tis but one. And thus in me all me's I have. I cannot hate. I cannot shun myself from me. I can but love. So it's a very powerful mantra, really, a powerful mantra. Well, there's one aspect of Vivekananda's love we haven't touched on yet, and briefly, that is the love for God, the intense love which breaks all the bonds of this world and becomes a madness. It becomes an intoxication. It sweeps us off our feet and takes us right to the feet of the divine. And he writes in some of his letters, you can catch some of this ecstasy that he's experiencing as he's thinking of God, and he's loving his playfellow, his divine buddy, his friend, God. You will be pleased to know, he writes to Francis Leggett, you will be pleased to know that I am also learning my lessons every day in patience and above all in sympathy. I think I am slowly approaching to that state when I should be able to love the very devil himself, if there were any. At 20 years of age, I was the most unsympathetic, uncompromising fanatic. I would not walk on the footpath on the theater side of the streets in Calcutta. The theaters were considered not very wholesome places, unwholesome places. At 33, 13 years later, I can live in the same house with prostitutes and never would think of saying a word of reproach to them. Is it degenerate? Or is it that I am broadening out into the universal love, which is the Lord himself? Some days I get into a sort of ecstasy. I feel that I must bless everyone, everything, love and embrace everything, and I do see that evil is a delusion. I am in one of these moods now, dear Francis, and am actually shedding tears of joy at the thought of you and Mrs. Leggett's love and kindness to me. I bless the day I was born. I have had so much of kindness and love here, and that love infinite that brought me into being has guarded every one of my actions, good or bad. For what am I? What was I ever but a tool in his hands, for whose service I have given up everything? My beloved ones, my joys, my life. He is my playful darling. I am his playfellow. There is neither rhyme nor reason in the universe. That reason binds him. He, the playful one, is playing these tears and laughters over all parts of the play. Great fun, great fun. He goes into this ecstasy. This is the divine love. This takes it to another level. So we see both of these different aspects in Swami Vivekananda. He closes this letter, I have learned a thing or two. Beyond reason and learning and talking is the feeling, the love, the beloved. I, sake, fill up the cup and we will be mad. Beautiful. Well, I think we're coming up on the end of the hour, and I've poured too many quotes of Swami Vivekananda into your ears, but this idea of drinking the cup of love and becoming mad, can we taste that? That's the cup from which Mira drank, Mirabai, our song that we opened with. The final thought I wanted to present to you is that when we have this love, we are bound at the same time to see how most people do not have it, and therefore they are suffering, they are in misery, they are in ignorance, and something wakes up inside of us, and we hear the call of suffering humanity, and we want to alleviate it. We are called to alleviate it. And this is the call that Swami Vivekananda heard, and which he calls on us also to take up, to sacrifice ourselves for the world. This is that feeling, that mood that caused him to break down in tears in that incident we talked about right at the beginning. One idea that I see clear as daylight is that misery is caused by ignorance and nothing else. Who will give the world light? Sacrifice in the past has been the law. It will be, alas, for ages to come. The earth's bravest and best will have to sacrifice themselves for the good of many, for the welfare of all. Buddhas by the hundred are necessary, with eternal love and pity. Bold words and bolder deeds are what we want. Awake, awake, great ones, the world is burning with misery. Can you sleep? Let us call and call till the sleeping gods awake, till the God within answers to the call. So this is Swami Vivekananda's heart, which holds all of us in tender embrace and sees that we're all suffering in ignorance and selfishness, and says, wake up. Awake, awake. What more is in life? What greater work? The details come to me as I go. I never make plans. Plans grow and work themselves. I only say, awake, awake. This is the call of Swami Vivekananda to us. Awake, awaken to that infinite love, which is our true nature, which lies within us, and let it out. Get out of the way and let it spread forth across the world. So this is my presentation today. Thank you for giving me the chance to read some of the inspiring quotes of Swami Vivekananda. In some, I would like to say that we see in a few different aspects of Swamiji's love. On the one hand, his tremendous love for humanity, or we should say for divinity manifesting in all beings, and his concomitant suffering, seeing that misery, which impelled him to work ceaselessly to alleviate misery. Then, this mystic love, which we touched on at the end, this madness of love, where God is his own playmate, his own most dearest beloved, and this world is only a playground, playing with God, which leads to this intoxication, this madness, and where all suffering disappears. And at last, where love, lover, and beloved become one. This is really the last word for Vivekananda. Even in the path of love, finally love, lover, and beloved become one. Why is there any separation between the soul and God? just to have this enjoyment of love. So that's where we conclude today's presentation. Next week, our speaker will be, first of all, thanks for that song, which is very well known to me. It's a part of the Vivekananda Oratorio, and we actually read from that letter of Swami Vivekananda, Love Never Fails, today or tomorrow. That's put to music by Swami Vivekananda, and a beautiful song. Next week, our speaker will be Pravrajika Sevaprana, and her topic is Satya, or truth. Saturday is Ram Navami, the birthday of Sri Rama, and we'll have Ram Nam on Saturday evening at 6:30. The worship, we have our usual Aarati at 6 p.m. At 6:30 will be the worship of Sri Ram, and at 7 o'clock we start the Ram Nam Sankirtan, singing the names of Rama, which we do every month, and you're welcome to join us. It's a festive occasion, and there's always a prasad afterwards, blessed offerings, and it's always very tasty. So that's an additional benefit of joining us. We get singing the holy names, and we get something good to eat. Did you have an announcement, Swami Vivekananda? Oh, I thought. Okay, so I think that covers our announcements. Does anyone have any questions to ask Swami?
Thank you very much for the message. My question is, once you're starting to wake up, how do you make up for the mess you made when you were asleep?
Yeah, that's a nice question. Well, I think the 12 steps programs, they do talk about making amends, right? For when we have, I think it comes naturally as we wake up. We will certainly, as we start to manifest more and more of that love, people will notice that, hey, this is not the same guy I knew before. He's changing. He's starting to manifest that love. He's starting to manifest that peace. And yes, we can. It may be at times that we and that takes tremendous courage and tremendous humility to approach someone and say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I did. I wasn't, I was still asleep. And there may be cases where we just let the water that's passed under the bridge, let it go. Let it go.
I just want to add to that is that I feel that when we tell the Creator, I'm not going to ever do that again, and they are convinced, and they know that gets completely annihilate it, whatever we've done, anything, it could be murder, anything, it gets, never has happened if they are convinced and we are convinced we're not going to do it again, and then that's it.
Thank you.
Swamiji, there's that Mira line, I felt the swaying of a great elephant's shoulders, and now you expect me to ride a jackass? Try to be serious. So like, I have this mood, exactly like this feeling of, there is a jackass in this world, and it's all conversations about worldliness, finances, any kind of tedium that's not related to God somehow is unbearable to me.
Yeah.
So obviously there's not yet this high-souled love that can accept everything as blazing forth of that one Brahman. There's still a distinction, which is the things that I consider to be spiritual and those that I consider not to be.
All right.
You know, so is there room in this like unconditional love to have this condition, which is to say, I love that which is unconditional, and my condition is I don't like the stuff that is conditional.
It's interesting because Sri Ramakrishna himself could found worldly talk unbearable. He couldn't bear it, and it's a good sign. And we need that kind of protection in our spiritual life, especially when we're starting out, to keep our minds fixed on the goal. Now we find with Swami Vivekananda, he could talk about everything. He had attained to that, like Shiva, he could digest everything, and everything for him was spiritual. So even if he's talking about finances and all of that, it did not distract his mind from the constant awareness of who he is as infinite consciousness and bliss. So both sides are there. At the beginning of spiritual life, certainly we are cautioned to be careful to protect ourselves and protect our spiritual lives that way.
So as a beginner, I should be discriminating. I should be that.
But can you do it without hatred? Sri Ramakrishna he came into a room once and there was a newspaper lying there, and before he would sit down, he asked that the newspaper be removed. But he didn't disparage, hey, get that out of here. No. He just asked him, please remove it. And then he entered and sat down.
This irritation and frustration, I feel it's really a form of hatred now. It's still contracted, so I suppose you're saying, do move away from that?
Not everybody is ready. Not everybody is ready for spiritual life. Most people are not ready for it. And we shouldn't overestimate our power at the beginning. Some people say, well, why do you keep away from worldly people? You should rather, they need your company more than anybody because you're going to transform them by your love and your spirituality. We shouldn't overestimate our power to transform others. We also have to be careful of their power to transform us. The power of holy company is tremendous, and the power of wicked company is also tremendous. So we can be careful. Salute them from a distance. Salute those things from a distance. Are there any questions?
Just one more question.
Hi, I'm Raymond.
Raymond.
Sounds funny to be on the microphone. What I was going to ask was, this is my first time arriving at this temple, and the gentleman, what is his name again?
Ramakrishna?
Yeah, his image always been sort of attractive to me, so I'm curious of who he is, if you could give me a quick summary.
Well, we can talk a little more afterwards, maybe. But Sri Ramakrishna founded this organization. He lived till 1886 in India, and he preached the harmony of religions and the reality of God. And one of his foremost disciples was Swami Vivekananda, who I was reading about today, whose teachings I was reading today, and. His life is a wonderful example of real religion in practice, which means realization, not just talks, but actual realization. When Swami Vivekananda first met him, he asked him, have you seen God? And Sri Ramakrishna answered without dropping a beat, yes, I see him more clearly than I see you sitting in front of me. And what's more, I can show him to you. So that's Ramakrishna in a nutshell. I think we should probably wrap up. Are there any questions online that we need to address?
There is one question. What are tips on loving selflessly, yet having wise, healthy boundaries?
Sometimes it actually all comes from love, because if we don't have boundaries, then actually we enable others to act in ways that harm them, harm themselves. Whenever we harm someone, we harm ourselves, actually. If we can, yes, as we begin to love selflessly, as we begin to pour our love out, that love must also include ourselves. And so in the realm of duality, when we're still in this world, sometimes it may be necessary to hiss, as Sri Ramakrishna said. The snake needs to hiss or it gets attacked. But with love, can we do it with love? Can we recognize that neither am I being well served or are you being well served by this transgression of this boundary? It's a question of gradual maturation. I'll close with a prayer. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Durjana Sajjano Bhuyat Sajjana Shanti Mapnuyat Shanto Muccheta Bandhebhyo Muktaschanyan Vimochayet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May all beings be happy. May all be free from disease. May all experience the highest good. May no one suffer misery. May the wicked become virtuous. May the virtuous attain to peace. May the peaceful be free from bondage. May the freed lead others to freedom. Om, peace, peace.